All right, I think we've given everybody enough time. You want to talk us in here, Marnie?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Marnie from Lifecycle Insights. So we are pretty excited to talk to you today about sort of a framework around getting QBRs right, or TBRs or SBRs. I've heard EBRs, PBRs, so XBRs, whatever you want to call your business reviews. We're going to chat around those pieces. In particular, Alex is going to talk about I'm going to talk about the segmentation piece, but the topics we're going to chat about are segmentation, standardization, strategy, or how to strategize and then scale the process. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Alex. And Alex, do you want me to stop sharing my screen, or you want to leave this?
You can leave this up for now. We'll jump into the other stuff in a couple of minutes.
Perfect.
So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Alex Farling. I used to run a small MSP in Delaware, about 16 and a half years in that business. And QBRs was one of my strengths, but also one of my pain points. It was something that we had a pretty good process for, but it took a long time to prepare. So Lifecycle Insights is kind of something that was born from figuring out how to do this better and how to do it faster and how to be able to scale it across a team so that account managers, both technical and not, could deliver the same kind of an experience for your customer and do so in a language and a conversation that your non-technical CEOs and COOs and CFOs could all get behind and could all really participate in that conversation so that they saw the value in it. So that's kind of where we're coming from. Doing this for so many years at my MSP, it kind of takes me back to to where we came from, which is going to lead me right into the quote that I wanted to share with you guys when we started this. And it's a quote from Maya Angelou, which I think is just fantastic. It applies to so many things we do in IT. And it says, I have great respect for the past. If you don't know where you've come from, you don't know where you're going. And when you think about that from an IT perspective, it really plays into a lot of different pieces of IT, right? The first thing we do in any framework in IT is inventory, figure out where we are, run a risk assessment, figure out where we are. All of the different everything in IT is about anything, and everything in security and cybersecurity is about knowing where we start so we know where our risks and our gaps are moving forward so that we can improve on the process. And I'd like to challenge you guys today that your QBR framework is the same way. It doesn't matter if you have an existing framework that's absolutely knocking it out of the park, but that takes too long, which is what we felt like we had at my MSP. It would take us 6, 7, 8 hours to prep for a QBR. Or if you don't know where to start, it doesn't matter which of those scenarios you're in or if you're somewhere in the middle. You really still need to step back and kind of take an inventory of where you're at to figure out what it's going to take for you, where you can apply the best improvements to really build out a framework that works for you and your customers. So today, we're going to talk through 4 core pieces of framework that we think can really help you, and how they've helped some of our clients in the past. So to that end, I think we're going to start with just a couple of stories. I'm going to tell you about 2 clients at Lifecycle Insights here that have worked with us for a couple of months, and they're really starting to see the benefits of dialing in this process. The first comes from a client who really didn't have a business review process before. It was one of those things, and I hear this so often when we're out in social media and out in the forums and talking to MSPs. He says, my clients didn't see the value in it, so I just wasn't doing it. But when he came and talked to me, he said he was stuck. His revenue was really stagnant. He was a small MSP, just like 4 employees, himself and 3 other employees. When he sat down with us and really learned the right QBR framework and went out and met with his biggest client, he came back from that meeting with a large 5-figure sale. And he reached out to me right after the meeting and he says, I did everything we talked about. I deployed the framework exactly how we talked about it, and I got stuck. And I went, what do you mean you got stuck? I thought we were good to go. I thought you were ready to rock and roll. And he says, yeah, they said, let's do it. I said, well, that's a good thing. How's that stuck? And he says, I didn't know what to do next. Well, what do you mean you didn't know what to do next? And he says, well, they wanted everything. I laid out a ton of work and they wanted it all. And he says, I never in my wildest dreams believed that just by showing them risk and really laying out the business prospects and the business impacts of all of this, that they would take it all. And they took a large 5-figure project. And I said, well, I hope you went back and figured out how to send him an invoice. And sure enough, he did. And since then, this guy has signed new business. He's grown his company. And one of his employees who had been with him for several years, when he walked back in the door with a new signed contract, said, you realize this is the first time since I worked here that you've ever brought on a new client. So doing this, just doing the right things, building this framework and practicing at it will not just lead to good QBRs, but it'll also lead to a sales process that talks more about who we are and how we work with our clients and what your experience looks like instead of a sales process that talks about, we have better backups, we have better AV, we have more gigabytes, we have bigger petaflops, our flux capacitors are faster, right? We get out of that conversation and we get into the conversation of, we've seen customers in your situation before, we can clean up your technology and help you fix it, right? And they're human conversations at that point. The other customer I want to talk about is a larger MSP, at least in comparison. He had a QBR process, but it was pretty technical. He was going in with patch stats and CSAT statistics and email stats and anti-spam and all this kind of stuff, and telling the customer about all the things he's doing for them and trying to justify his existence. And when we sat down and really talked through our thought process around the QBR, which was really delivering business value back to your client, not justifying your existence, he was able to go into an existing client, give a business review for a client that was spending $3,900 a month, and walk out with a signed deal for $6,500 a month for the same client on a 3-year contract. So, we have a lot of these stories. I like to share them because I think everybody's in a different place, but it's nice to be able to relate where you're at today with the fact that everybody starts somewhere. The journey still looks kind of the same. It's about figure out where you are, figure out where you're falling short, where you're not really delivering on the value to your customer, and improving your process, improving your framework to make sure that that you deliver that. So, speaking through the process of continuous improvement, we've all seen the life cycle process, or the continuous improvement process that happens in technology. And you always have the circle with the arrows pointing around in it. Your business review is like any other process, and it almost relates to your sales process, where there needs to be a continuous improvement on this process itself. If you have a business review process today, it doesn't mean throw it away, start over with what we're giving you today. And if you have nothing, then starting with what we give you today at least gives you some building blocks. But look at this as an opportunity to incrementally improve on what you're doing up to this point, so that we can build a little bit better process and continue to improve it. And the only thing I'll say before we kick off is that I think each and every one of you should have someone, whether it's a partner in a peer group, whether it's somebody inside your business, or maybe it's somebody totally separate from your business, that you can call when you get done with a business review and kind of have an accountability discussion. I think one of the most valuable things we can do is have the conversation with somebody else while it's fresh in your brain. Hey, I just walked out of a business review. Here's the things I think went well, and here's the things I think we might be able to do better on next time. And it's important to not beat yourself up on the things we can do better next time, right? No matter how good we are, Babe Ruth still worked to improve his batting average, right? So it doesn't matter how good you are, there's always room for improvement. And if we continue to approach it from that perspective, from that continuous improvement model, you'll get something that's really dialed in and delivers for your customer. So with that, I think we're going to launch a new screen share here and kick off with a worksheet that we're going to play with. So we're going to talk about 4 pieces of the framework that we want to build out for our MSPs to work through. And just because they play really nicely, we found our 4 little S's so that we can all be cool and have our 4 S's of a QBR framework. But we want to talk through how to segment our clients. What are we going to do to break out clients and deliver the right QBR experience for each client, because not every customer deserves the same thing. To that end, we want to standardize. So all of our clients in a given segment should get a similar experience. This is both so we can scale inside our business, and so that we can make sure that we're not missing anything, and that we're continuing to improve that process, right? If we don't standardize, we're all over the place. We're not doing it the same two times in a row, and there's nothing to really sit and dissect and improve. We want to dig into strategy, so we want to make sure that we get out of the technical and into the larger strategy items. And then last and not least, of course, we want to figure out how to scale this. If you're a one-man show, you might not be thinking about scaling yet, but the old adage that you're not replaceable, or you're not promotable until you're replaceable. You can't get out of the job of giving the QBRs until you've taught somebody else enough to do it. And if you don't have a process, you really can't do that. So we're going to dive into each of these today. Segmentation specifically, the big one that we always start with in Lifecycle Insights, and it's actually even a piece of the Lifecycle Insights framework, is Cadence. So if I can figure out my fancy Apple Pencil here, we're going to throw Cadence in this box. So Cadence basically is depending on who our customer is, what industry segment they're in, how large they are, how much money they spend with us. I love the Chartex standard, which is if they spend $1,000 a month with you, that's 1 meeting a year. If they spend $4,000 a month with you, that's 4 meetings a year. So if you have a client who's spending $12,000 a month with you, you're probably going to meet with that client every single month. But we should take our clients, break them out into buckets, and decide what the cadence is for how often to meet with them. That's the big pushback against the term QBR, is that if you're not doing them quarterly, you probably shouldn't be calling them a QBR. And for a lot of our customers, I had clients in manufacturing who had 12 computers in their building, and all they used them for was to print packing and shipping labels. Those guys did not need to see me 4 times a year, and they certainly didn't need to see me 12 times a year. So, make sure that you're making adjustments based on your client's industry, on their needs, on those kind of things, so that we're in their face only often enough to deliver value, and not in their face so often that they don't want to come back. The other thing about segmentation is deliverables. It may be, and you guys get to see all my terrible handwriting, believe it or not. I went to Catholic school, but here's our deliverables. It may be that depending on, again, that spend of the client or the technology level of the client or something else that has to do with their industry, their business, how they use technology, that your deliverables are different depending on your different customers. It may be that some customers maybe don't see the value in or don't have a need for user account control. You'll have customers who have a lot of, and this is always a challenge for MSPs, but what do you do with that customer who has folks who just rotate through a bunch of part-time employees that run by a computer, type something in and run away? Does user account reporting really matter as much there? Well, hopefully you've got something to do for user account control and for managing that. In some places, it's just a challenge and it doesn't make sense. If you've got somebody with a huge BYOD environment, then your inventory is going to be way different. It may be that for some of your clients, you need to deliver a large project build out or a big strategic roadmap, and other clients are just maintaining and doing what they've always been doing, and they've already made a big move to the cloud, and there's not a whole lot of project road mapping and crazy stuff to be done. So think about the deliverables that fit with each group of customers as you start to segment them out. They may very well be different. And the last one is venue. This is really important. Even pre-pandemic, we used to preach that your once-a-year clients probably don't justify a face-to-face business review. They're spending $1,000 a month with you. Do you really need to go out and meet with them face-to-face? What about the client who's spending even less than $1,000 a month with you? Are you going to dump some of these reports to an email? And do you have a lowest tier of your business, especially if you're a smaller MSP or a startup that doesn't have the, maybe you're not able to be as picky about what clients you take on? Well, that client who's only spending a few $100 a month with you, you need to make sure that you're not wasting a lot of time out there doing, face-to-face meetings, driving to their offices, sitting around a conference room table and all that when there's just not the value to gain back out of it. Because at the end of the day, this is a cost center. This takes away from your margins. You have to go sit in their boardroom and have these conversations, and you don't want it to be so impactful against their contract. If you're tracking all this time in Categorize to say, oh, I just spent 4 hours prepping for a business review for these people, I'm not going to be profitable on them for 6 more months. That makes you put a bad taste in your mouth for your client only because you failed to plan, failed to segment, failed to give them the right business review. So there may be some folks that are face-to-face. There may be some folks that are virtual. There may even be a low tier, depending on your business, that is email only or email with a quick follow-up 30-minute Zoom call, so that you're not spending a lot of time in this. Did I miss anything obvious in that section, Marnie?
No, I like to say there's high touch, mid touch, and tech touch, right? So that bottom tier that gets the automated responses, they can still be personable for sure, but they can be digital. Right.
That's a nice little combination of those 4 there, right? And your high touch may be that monthly customer, especially if you've got somebody who's got a huge growth trajectory or who's just a really large customer that spends a lot of money and a lot of time with you. Don't neglect that customer because you've got a quarterly cadence stuck in your head because somebody used the phrase QBR. So when we move into standardization, one of the things that we want to talk about is the risk or gap assessment. A big important piece of making this presentation is delivering the strategic piece. How does the technology problem impact the business? Well, we've got to do some sort of an assessment here. Some people call it a risk assessment. Others are doing a gap assessment, which you could argue that they're different. For most MSPs, they're one and the same. This is something where we really need to build out an assessment template. So we really want to make sure that we're giving a similar risk assessment for everyone in a similar category. So it may be that your high-tech folks get a 200 question risk assessment, and that your mid-touch folks are getting that 50, 70 question risk assessment, and that your tech folks are only getting a 37 or a 30 question risk assessment. So it may be, depending on your tiers, that you're doing something different, but make sure you standardize it so that you know, in my high tier, I've got to do 200 questions. I've got to get a VCIO involved. I've got to get a second level engineer involved to go do some fancy things. Obviously, building that template and making the template work is super important. If you're a Lifecycle Insights customer, we have a couple of things in our platform that really help you. We have scoring instructions next to every single assessment item. I think it's an underused section in our platform. A lot of our customers don't use this function because it takes time to build, but it's worth the time to build because this will turn back up as we talk about scaling. The only way to hand things down is to leave good instruction. So if you fill out these scoring instructions, and in a lot of places you can go leave an IT glue document, a Hoodoo link, a link to a SharePoint doc, wherever you document things, you can have a link that says, hey, to answer this question, follow these instructions. Here's some screenshots. Now all of a sudden I can take something that belongs to that really top tier person and hand it down to a lesser expensive individual, and have somebody at the intern level, at the office manager level, do some of this work. So think about that.
Can I interject real quick? Yesterday, I was chatting with a fairly large managed service provider who is combining the notion of segmentation and standardization. So they have the large 200 question assessment, but they don't do every piece each quarter. So they're starting with 70 questions that they know they want in their next quarter, and they are standardizing that. So they're doing scoring instructions for the first chunk, so they're not overwhelmed with 200 at once. And that's a good way for them to just focus, like, eye on the prize. The next thing we're doing is this.
Yep. And that's fantastic. Every bit of this, you have to break it into bite-sized pieces, or you'll make yourself crazy trying to swallow it all. So, iterative improvement, where we are, a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. Before you know it, you'll have a really dialed in, banging process. So let's talk about the common components of a good QBR. Obviously, we're doing the assessment. There's a lot of supporting documentation that goes around this. My favorite, and what I think is probably the most impactful to most of our customers, is the budget. I like the budget because when I presented it to my customers for the first time, it was the document that I laid down on the table, and it got their jaw to drop. It got them to get giddy. My finance people always went, "Oh my God, I've never had this before." And I was lucky enough to say, well, that's cool, because the technology to build this never really existed, and manually it was darn near impossible to build. But now that we have a tool that will build it for us, it's actually really easy for me to build this for you. So there's no reason for you not to have it before. The budget is the most important because it helps you see around corners, helps you see things way down the road. We've got an example in our demo tenant that actually it's pretty close to what we saw in some live customers, where it's the Windows XP revival is what I call it. Windows XP died, we replaced 50 computers. We didn't touch those again until Windows 7 died, and then we replaced 50 computers. Then Windows 10 is supposed to live forever, but guess what? Those 50 computers are all going to become 5, 6, 7 years old together. And there's a big spend that's going to follow those. So our customers get this sine wave of expenditure that makes it really hard to budget for. So if we can show them that, if we can show them what a budget looks like 5 years down the road, we can help them spread those expenses out, move them into different years and different quarters, and strategically plan to make sure that we don't back them into a corner again. Because those of you who have been in this for a long time, like me, you remember what it was like when you walked in the door with Windows XP and said, it's going to die, you have to get rid of it. It's going to cost you $40,000 or whatever the number was. Those are not comfortable conversations. The other thing that we do with a budget is have a near-term conversation. This is the more tactical conversation, less strategic, more tactical. These are actionable items where we lay down a specific budget that says, hey, in the next month or the next 3 months, Sally in accounting gets a new PC, Bob in shipping and receiving gets a new PC, and we're going to replace that firewall that's getting old, right? Things we can put our finger on. I call them tactical if I can assign a service ticket to them and they get done, right? If they're bigger than that, then they're strategic. Your budget looking 5 years down the road. The other things that you're going to need to support some supporting documentation around this, you're going to want to have an asset inventory. If you're doing any other frameworks, all the frameworks kind of start with, you've got to have an inventory. So, whether you're doing CMMC, NIST, CIS 20, Australian Essential 8, It doesn't matter what your framework, they all start with know what you own. You can't protect it if you don't know what it is. You can't protect it if you, if it's in the dark, or if you can't see it. So we start with an asset inventory, and we follow that up with a user inventory. I was lax on this at my MSP, but what we're going to find is that more and more you guys are going to need to pay attention to this, because it's part of all of these frameworks. The user inventory is something that, as much as we'd like to say it doesn't change very often, it's not a big deal. We just keep on top of it for our customers. It's very important because it's part of all these frameworks. Do you know that all your old users are getting deactivated? Do you know that you're reducing your threat exposure by getting rid of stale old accounts, changing passwords, and doing all those other things? So this one's going to circle back around and become more important than I think some of us made it in the past. The next piece, of course, is remediation planning. So whatever we find on this risk assessment, we need to remedy it. If you're using Lifecycle Insights and you've watched me do a demo with it, I always go right towards our second template for printing out all of our risk assessments, because I feel like it has the best remediation plan on the back end of it. It is the remediation template that I really skip right to. Like, you can go over the front page, you can go over the executive summary, or whatever you want to call it, with your customer. Hey, this is how you did on your last risk assessment. But at the end of the day, what's going to move the needle is what you do after the fact. We've assessed it, we've taken an inventory, we know where we are. But since we know where we are, now we need to figure out where we're going. And back to my Maya Angelou quote, we need to be planning for the future. We need to know where we are now that know where we're going now that we know where we are. And then a few small documents that are going to help you along the way. An agenda, an executive summary. And if you insist on bringing some technical stuff to your business review, if you listen to me talk, if you watch me do them, I don't bring anything technical. One of my favorite comments from one of our clients, maybe my favorite comment from one of our clients ever, was we were talking about SLAs, and he called it the service level argument. Right? There's no benefit to you in bringing ticket stats, patch stats, SLA documents, all that crap to these business reviews, because all it is something to pick a fight over. If you're doing your job, if you're presenting your customer with strategic things that look forward, they're not going to be looking backward. The agenda, super helpful. It helps you smoke out those technical problems. And I'll give you guys my 30-second soapbox pitch on agendas. Send an agenda 2 weeks ahead of time for every QBR. Tell the customer what you want to talk about. It should have your big remediation planning items in it. It should tell them that you're going to review a budget. It should tell them you're going to review a cybersecurity risk analysis, or whatever you want to call your assessment. Big words, make it sound fancy, make it sound important, so they want to come to the table. And it should have room in there for them to give you feedback on the things that they want to talk about. If they tell you they want to talk about SLAs, if they tell you they want to talk about Billy was mean to Sally on the last service ticket, or you didn't respond fast enough to something, pick up the phone and kill that issue right away. Don't let it wait to derail your strategic conversation. Mr. Customer, your satisfaction is too important for me for this to wait 2 weeks for us to be sitting face to face. I want to knock this out right now. So if I need to go in the back and scold one of my techs, I will do that right now. I'll get it taken care of, and we can move on. This is the best way to keep this meeting strategic. And any of you who have heard me talk about the $800 room, we need to deliver value in this meeting. If you have 10 people sitting in the room and they make an average of $80 an hour, guess what? You need to have yourself one heck of a business review in order to justify taking those people away from their day job to sit in the meeting and spend time with you. Have I covered that to excess there, Marnie?
No, you're good. But I'm taking note that if you tell me 30 seconds, you really mean 2 minutes.
2 minutes, got it. I don't tell time well. My fiance will tell you guys that. I'm never on time. Strategize. So when we mean strategize, we really want to talk about big picture items. So one of the things that we like to talk about is technology total cost of ownership. And my handwriting's terrible today. So what do I mean by total cost of ownership? Well, this is where we have a conversation about things that are more than just the bills they're going to write to my MSP. We want to talk about everything there is to do with technology in this customer's environment. So I'm going to be presenting them on their budget. How much is their cable bill? How much do they pay for their phone service? Are they paying maintenance on camera systems or door access panels or anything else that we can think of? I want this budget item, this guy over here, I want him to be 100% complete. I don't want it to be a list of the items that my MSP is going to bill you for next quarter. I want it to be a list of the things that you're going to have to spend next quarter, so we can talk about total cost of ownership of all of your technology, line of business applications, your Adobe subscriptions, everything. so that you know what technology costs, not just how many of my Maserati payments you're going to make. Because when all we're talking about is the bills that I'm going to send, it feels like a very personal, very not strategic conversation, right? If we can talk about the bigger picture, if we can talk about all the things they're going to do with technology that has nothing to do with us, guess what? I just built value to my customer in their mind of having me included in those other conversations. And they're going to ask me back. They're going to include me in more of the conversations. I'm training them, just like you train a puppy, just like you train your children, that, hey, we're going to have these big conversations or something that I can bring value to, and you want to have me there for them. So think about that. Total cost of ownership for your technology. This fits into your budget, especially long term. Remediation planning. Make sure that when you do remediation planning, it's aligned with their business goals. Part of your agenda when you send this out should be, what is the customer doing for the next 6 quarters? Are they adding offices? Are they adding salespeople? Did this recession kick their butt and they're having to downsize and close offices and figure out how to reduce cash flow? Like, what are we doing and how are we using technology to actually address business goals? So remediation has to meet the business goals. Not my goals, but business goals. So these are the goals where we have to be quiet, listen, ask our questions, and then, chew on our pencil for a little bit while they tell us what they're going to do with their business. What kind of a situation they're in, what's happening with this customer. And then our remediation planning needs to include all of that. And then, the last thing is, additional template options. If you want to bring in some additional conversations and strategy when you're building out your own process, these might be internal to you. You might have something for pre-sales, right? And this is kind of to what Marnie was talking about with the big MSP that's using the same risk assessment, but 70 questions here, another 70 questions here, another 40 questions here. CMMC has really brought this interesting concept to us of the tiered assessment. So you can do a level 1 assessment that is really basic cyber hygiene. Level 2 assessment that's cyber hygiene plus proving that you're doing what you say you're doing with some documentation. And then level 3 that's proving what cyber hygiene, proving you're saying what you're doing, and documenting policy and procedure so that you can have people sign off on it and do all that kind of stuff. So you've got your layers and your tiers of this. For your MSP, think about it from this perspective. Is the same assessment template. Can I take this template right here and say, hey, you know what? It's going to be 5 tiers, and one of those tiers is going to be pre-sales. And I'm going to go meet with a brand new customer, and I'm just going to ask them the first 30 questions. Cyber hygiene, basic stuff. Is their server about to catch on fire and burn down the building, or is it still under manufacturer's warranty, going to be good for a little while? Do we have a reasonable backup in place? Are they plugged into a cable modem, or is it just the firewall? This should be the really basic stuff I can get with a network detective, a cyber CNS scan, some sort of a walkthrough of the building, just real big top level stuff. Then you add 70 questions that are, once we onboard you, we can answer this much more information. Then we add the year 1 or year 2 questions that are, hey, what does the actual inside of the firewall look like? What do all our cloud service configurations look like? Is Office 365 secure, or is our secure score a low double-digit number that we should be embarrassed by if the customer ever logged in and actually found it? Not that any MSPs are in that boat, but we want to make sure that we're building these templates in our system so that we have some strategy that we can use, and we can train our team that, hey, these are the steps that we work through with the customer. And this almost becomes the customer lifecycle, the customer journey. And we talk about this occasionally with what it looks like to take on a new customer, and then what their journey is as we get them right-sized, as we get them cleaned up, as we get them working in a better place, as we get them under warranty and using better products and services and such. This becomes part of your sales pitch. Mr. Customer, we've seen folks in your situation before. They've worked with us through their customer journey, and this is how they come out looking on the other side. So it's one of the most valuable pieces to your sales tools, knowing what that looks like. Some other things you can throw in there. If you wanted to do some sort of a stack alignment assessment, it never hurts to have something in your documentation. You can do it in our platform. You can do it manually with a spreadsheet if you're not a lifecycle customer. But this gives you the ability to really say, this customer buys 27 of my products, 27 of my 50 products and services. This customer buys all 50. This customer is only buying 4. Well, the customer that's only buying 4 is barely a customer and probably poses a lot of risk to me. So we need to go give him a business review. That's where our opportunity lives, and that's where our risk lives. If we give him a business review and he doesn't budge, then it may be time to let him go if we're an MSP that's in a position to do that. If we're not, then we need to have the real tough conversation about, hey, you can't ride my cyber liability insurance because you don't want to do the right things. we got to find a happy place here. So there's a lot of different types of assessments that we can run. Some of this happens in our platform almost automatically, but you can build some of this out, in spreadsheets and such if you're not using Lifecycle Insights. Anything I missed there, Marnie?
No, I like it.
All right, now we're going to step into scale. Scale is a big one. It doesn't matter how big you are. You should be thinking like you're scaling, thinking like you're growing, and thinking like you're selling. One of the things I learned when I owned my MSP was you never know what day you're going to be sold. COVID came around. I had really, there was a point at which I was just frustrated with it and thought I might sell it. I think COVID came around and I went, the market's going to be terrible. I'm just going to right size everything, spend some time in it, get everything right to where I could sell it. And my attorney called me and said, there's a guy you need to talk to. And I went, I'm going to lose a customer over COVID. Our billables are probably going to be down. This is the wrong time to do that. I'm just not going to get what I want out of the business. 45 days after that phone call, I had a check in my hand after my attorney bludgeoned me and dragged me in front of the person he thought I should meet. And he made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So run your business every day like you think it might be the opportunity to sell it. And that includes the process to scale. So as part of scale is delegate. If there are processes in your business that you're the only person that can do, guess what? You're stuck. You're stuck in that business. You can't take vacation. You can't walk away. You can't go do something else. So if you can delegate these things, and risk assessments are a big one.
So it's interesting. I'm thinking about the same client that I spoke to yesterday about their risk assessment. They are parsing out which of the questions get answered by which of the folks. And they have a technical someone that's going to score their assessment and do the data cleanup. They have an assistant that does the scheduling. And then for the report prep, the VCIO is the one that connects the business pane to it and sets up the projects with it. So they've really defined the roles. And the owner of the company is retiring. And so they have to have a process for each of the pieces lined up. That's what we're working on.
And that's perfect. What you've got is the small company. You can never leave. You can never take vacation. You can never step away from these things. The big company, hey, guess what? You got multiple people touching these. You might have 3-4 account managers looking their way up to one VCIO who kind of manages this whole process. But you can't have the VCIO doing every piece of it. So you've got to document that risk assessment, like we talked about earlier. You've got to build the scoring instructions, the strategy, the how do we answer this, right? There's going to be some data cleanup. We haven't really talked about that much today, but if you're using Categorize, if you're using Autotask, if you've had any of these solutions for very long, the folks who are Lifecycle Insights customers can tell you, when you go look inside your data, it's probably pretty bad. I think there's a reason that Categorize and Autotask and all these other vendors don't give you a data quality scoreboard, because they don't want you to know how much junk you've dumped in there, because if it's not in Categorize, it doesn't matter. So we take the lid off the trash can, we shove a bunch of stuff in it, and we slam the lid back down and sit on it to make sure everything fits, right? There's a lot of square peg round hole big hammer that goes into our Categorize instances, because we just want to get that data in there, because if it's not in Categorize, it didn't happen. Cleaning up that data today in most institutions is a process that requires the business owner, the VCIO, the service manager, some combination of those high level, most expensive people in the room. And that is a terrible use of a valuable resource. If you get the process dialed in for data cleanup, we've got one MSP, and some of you probably saw Kevin Elsing on one of our webinars, who has an intern doing this work. This is internal work. It was intern work at my MSP. And the beauty of it is, if you have an intern who does this work and does a good job, he'll learn his way around all your tools. He'll learn how to use your RMM, your PSA, your documentation management system. He'll figure out what works and what doesn't. He'll get good at doing documentation. And darn it, when you decide whether or not to offer this guy a job, guess what? You have a bunch of really good work to look at to say, does he have attention to detail, or is he just flying by the seat of his pants? And it helped us not hire some people we didn't want to hire. It helped us identify some good techs along the way and really bring in some good folks. So to that end, think about data cleanup can be that thing that a tier 1 or an intern or your more basic folks are doing, folks without that expensive high-tech skill set. Scheduling, Marnie was talking about having a scheduler, having an assistant and an admin assistant, an office person. I'm a big fan of your dispatcher, right? Their job is to manage calendars anyway. So, if you have a dispatcher, if you have a dedicated dispatcher, they should be scheduling these calls. It's probably work with the dispatcher and the VCIO saying, hey, I've got this coming up, and the dispatcher going, okay, give me a ticket, I'll get it scheduled, and we'll make it happen. But this is something that does not require the most expensive resource in the room, and is very, very, very easy to delegate if you build the process around it. If you don't build the process around it, obviously it won't happen and you'll be flying by the seat of your pants again. And then report prep. One of the big things that we do is, cobble together all these reports. And if you're using Lifecycle Insights, one of our biggest selling points is that we can make these reports for you quick and easy. But there's always a little bit of human intervention, right? We got to go look at our inventory and make sure everything looks right, make sure all of our pricing looks right, make sure all of our end of life makes sense, make sure no new assets have been out there since we cleaned it up last, and just dial it right in. But this is something that you can hand down. Again, when you heard Kevin talk on the webinar that he did with us, he has an intern doing most of this work. He doesn't even pick up the reports until a half hour or 15 minutes before he goes to give the QBR. He's got the process so dialed in that he just doesn't have to live in it. So if you can delegate these 4 core functions, you can really take a lot off the plate of the people who are your big strategic thinkers and hand it over to the folks who are your lather, rinse, repeat people. And this is really lather, rinse, repeat work if you think about it from that perspective. And what does that lead you to? It gives you more time to do the 2 things that you really care about, which include selling and growing. So this gives you the ability to take those important people to think about, what does it take? What are we going to do for projects now that we have this risk assessment? How are we going to remediate problems and generate new MRR? Or how are we going to go meet new customers and bring this same sales process, maybe with that pre-sales template, pre-sales assessment, bring this stuff out to new clients and new prospects? That's the kind of work that you're never going to ask an intern to do. They don't understand your business. They can't go give you that customer journey. But it's definitely something that you're going to want those folks to. It's definitely something that you're going to want to be able to, delegate the little stuff so that your important folks can focus on selling and growing and really taking your business to the next level, so that you have the need to scale. So that kind of sums up, building out that framework. I'd encourage you guys. Marnie's posted the link to this worksheet in the chat. I'd encourage you guys to download this and kind of scribble it out on your own. Your process will differ from mine. We're big believers at Lifecycle Insights that your business review has to be your own. It has to contain your DNA, is what I always say. So don't try and take everything that's ours and make it yours if you have something that works. And if you have nothing and you're starting from zero, take this as a starting block, then personalize it and make it something you can see coming from yourself, so that it really rings true to the message that you have at your MSP. Does that make sense? Comments, questions, anything? Anybody want to raise their hand, throw something in there? Marnie, do you want to throw something in there?
Okay, yes, I will. I'm responding to some chats at the same time.
Yep.
So I am also, I just put a link to the framework, which is the agenda piece that has the links to all of this. So really in the standardized piece, what I just downloaded or just put in the chat is the ability to connect to all of these pieces. Absolutely all of I was asked about videos. So if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can see all of our public videos. And then if you are a Lifecycle Insights client, if you are in our portal and you type workshop, you can get all of our workshops. But the one that he just mentioned, I will send out. So the Kevin video, I will send out as part of a follow-up to this. So anybody listening to this will get a copy of that, so you don't have to hunt that one down specifically. Okay. Oh, so you're putting the other pieces that are listed on the agenda up top.
Yeah, just giving them a couple extra ideas there.
Yep.
So that way it'll live in the recording so everybody can see it. All right, so we're gonna move on to our next page here, and Marnie's gonna dive in and go through the segmentation plan with you guys. So if I can figure out how to operate my fancy Apple.
So we're going to go back to the beginning where he really talked about segmentation, because this is really where you need to start, right? It's easy so every time I join a webinar and get, I'm hoping to get at least 1 to 3 takeaways, and then my to-do list grows by 57 things. And I always say, like, where am I supposed to start now? Because my to-do list do run like that. So this is really a place to start, because you need to look across your client base and be strategic yourself. Alex talked a lot about strategizing for your clients, with your clients, but this is also sort of a step back on your company strategy. So when we think about segmenting our clients, and this goes back to the high touch, mid touch, tech touch. I was director of customer success for a company where we had 17 customer success managers and scaled from 200 clients to 900. So for sure, we had to make a big jump from what was basically a 20-to-1 ratio to 5 times that, right? So when you go to 500, when you go to 100-to-1, you are going to have to figure out what you can do automated and what you can do manually. So my challenge for you is to think about 2 different ways to categorize your clients. There are lots of values to consider. So we're kind of in the upper right quadrant there. In the values to consider, you want to think about things like MRR or ARR, right? The size of the client, reference value, and if this is a new vertical for you.
Now, reference value is a term a lot of these folks probably aren't
So
thinking
this
about.
would be, if a new vertical is a great example. If you just sold to your first accountant and you wanted your accountant to then be a reference for you to other accountants, then even though that accountant might be a fairly small size in MRR, they provide additional value to your company as a reference. Somebody that's very vocal on social media or somebody well known in the community, those types of things might increase the way you think about a client, even if they're smaller in nature. So those sort of are all value type of metrics. Then the other piece to think about is things like how much effort does a client take? How much opportunity might there be? Really, what are their technology needs? So if Alex is going to sum it up, not in taking up the rest of the page, sort of technology needs or industry compliance regulation, right? That type of thing. And this is where, in my mind, along the horizontal axis, so now we're going to go over to the graph. Along the horizontal axis, you want to assign the horizontal axis to value, $, money, right? Something, so that as that goes up, the client is more valuable to you. And then along the vertical axis, we'll call it complexity, but it's one of those other metrics, be it effort, industry compliance, right? A HIPAA compliant client it takes a lot of time and effort on your end, but that also brings some opportunity. And what you really need to do is then place your clients along this spectrum. Where do they, right? So the arrow Alex drew is the larger complexity, the larger value, right? The more critical touches are with the clients. So you kind of go in and Alex, let's talk about that accountant that is maybe low value, but high value for reference, but low complexity. So they're kind of bottom right. Versus a client that is maybe small value, but amount of effort or amount of reference value, would be top left. And then in the bottom left corner, small value, small complexity, that would be maybe your break fix clients that Alex said, maybe you have some here that are only doing a few things with you. They might move up the spectrum if there's opportunity there. But these might be your really little clients that you don't need to meet with all of the time. But the more you go up and to the right, the more often you need to meet with your client. If you have a high value, complex client, right? They need to be your high touch. So I kind of draw diagonal lines and maybe just do a couple, Alex, to sort of define some spectrums that maybe you say, I'm going to meet with these monthly, or weekly, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, annually, right? And you kind of put that line to define where your clients fall so that this is how you break them into segments. And every company, I don't have a value for that it's got to be 10,000 MRR or 3,000 MRR. It's really determined by your range of your clients. And you really need to think about customer health over top of this, really, because if you have somebody way up in the top right that you consider at risk of churn, what percent of your business is that? So yeah, Alex is filling in the segmentation schedule. It's really to think about when you've plotted out your entire client base and you look at who you should be meeting with weekly, monthly, quarterly. Again, if you don't do weekly, maybe you only divide it up 4 times, because as Alex said, you really need to do this based on, your special DNA. It gives you a chance to think about what you're going to do in each of those sections. And those annual folks, are they the ones that you are looking at the tech touch, right? What are you automating for them? Yeah. So yeah, and if there's high risk of churn, you might have to level up. So some places we've talked with folks that maybe in onboarding, they do weekly for a month and then they move to whatever their regular cadence is, right? High risk of churn. If they're a semi-annual, but they're a high risk of churn, you suddenly boost them up to needing to meet with them the next quarter so that you can really, circle the wagons and do a recovery opportunity.
And to give you a real world example of this, at my MSP, I had a customer that they spent, I think, $3,000 or $3,500 a month with me. They were not what we would consider a quarterly. I'm sorry, they were what we would consider a quarterly meeting. They would never have fallen into a monthly schedule with us. But when they made some changes, they promoted a new girl to be our point of contact. She became their new director of operations, and she was challenging for us to work with. She just had a personality that if we didn't coddle her, she was a difficult person. She was hard on our tech. She was hard on me. She was hard on her account manager. And what we realized was if we met with her more often and we moved her to a weekly cadence for about 3 weeks, and then we realized that was too often and we moved her out to monthly, if we touched base with her for 15 minutes every month, she was a nicer, better human being. So think about that. If you've got a client who's a challenge, maybe move them up the scale a little bit. Start to consider taking that customer who's a challenge and moving them up a level or two to get them up here where they get a little bit more attention. A lot of this is about feel. A lot of this is about interaction, reaction. A lot of this is emotional and not actually about the value that you deliver. So if you can give somebody 30 minutes, a half hour, 45 minutes a month, and they're just a nicer human being to all your engineers, they take more of your advice, they become a better customer, it's probably worth that time. So something to think about for sure.
All right. So I want to add one piece to that is you mentioned you got a new point of contact. Leadership change is absolutely a time to check out the cadence with which you are meeting with them. 100%, right? Because that is, there's potential for churn, especially if that leader has worked with another MSP. And so you're just automatically competing with someone that you didn't even know you were competing with. You absolutely need to up them right up the scale to make sure you get in touch, have a face-to-face with them to circle the wagons. We were just asked, okay, Alex, you took care of it. Thank you.
Yep.
So are there any questions for folks about any of these pieces? But in particular, since we're on segmentation, around segmentation or other ideas, ways you've used this. We've talked with a lot of folks. Again, onboarding is one, leadership change, some places where they double down and do extra work. If someone on the team starts asking for a copy of the contract or starts asking for the passwords to the router, that's sort of a sign of churn and why you might need to jump them up to a faster cadence to really circle the wagons and strategize around what might be going on in there.
Reasons you might want to care.
Yeah.
Put it in that column.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That could vary. The complexity column matrix.
But I will say, if you dial in this process early and get to your customers on the regular, you will have and consistently, right? So that they know, hey, he's going to meet with me every quarter. This is what our relationship looks like, and you actually build that relationship. You'll get fewer of those calls asking to log into the router. You'll get fewer of those calls that tell you someone else is there with their USB thumb drive with Network Detective on it, trying to pilfer your network, because your clients will see more value in you. They'll realize that you're a strategic partner, not just a screwdriver turning or wrench turning monkey, and that you're just not a replaceable asset. You're not just a cog in the wheel that they can quickly replace. And so what you'll find is you just get fewer and fewer of those conversations. You get to charge more of a premium for your services. You get customers who take on more of your services, and you just have a better client experience altogether.
Alex, because I asked about the workshop, would you mind sharing Lifecycle Insights and showing the help and what pulls up when you grab the workshop pieces? And again, if folks have, so we're getting some private questions. If you have any questions for us or want to see bits and pieces, feel free to put them in the chat. We've got our eye on them. I think I've addressed most of them that have come through.
Yep. If you are unfamiliar with our workshops, if you're a Lifecycle Insights customer, you can go right into the help inside the platform. Type in workshop. It'll show you all the recorded workshops that we've done in the past, or at least the ones that we've uploaded, which I think is most of them. And then you'll be able to play these back and watch the video that comes along with them. So, we did at the end of the year, we did one about capturing year-end spend. We'll probably do another one similar to this at the end of or in the beginning of May to talk about how to take on the end of year for your clients and how to get in to have that one more meeting and deliver a little more value. We do a deep dive into things like assessments and contracts and individual pieces in the platform. So if you don't feel like you're on that list, make sure that you send us a message and just let us know. If you need to get on that list and you don't see something from us, it doesn't hurt either to just go help in the platform, contact us and just say, hey, I'm not on this list. We generally try and send it out to everybody who has an account in the system. So if you have an account in the system, you should be able to participate in those. Oh, you're muted.
You're faster than Zoom because it let me know right after you did. I also was asked for how to get a copy of all of our public videos. So I just put a link to our public YouTube channel in there as well.
Perfect.
So could you show, I'm getting asked if you could show sort of the default assessment that maybe a default assessment event, judging from the question. Sure. I'll see if
so assessments in our platform come from templates, and we give you a couple templates to pick from when you first get in the platform. So it probably makes sense to start there. This is one that I would say, what do you think, Marnie? 75% of our clients probably start with this.
Yeah, that's about where most folks start.
More and more, we're seeing folks moving towards something like CMMC when they start, but that default is a really good one, as is this pre-sales one. This is that 30 question, how do I get started? What can I see from a top level view, just standing in the server room, looking at things, writing down, the serial number off the server or whatever. But when we go to produce an actual risk assessment for a customer, this is what that looks like. You literally get to go through the platform and say, here's the situation. They are at risk of this. We ask about their internet security appliance. Well, I found it at risk at this customer because it lacks monitoring and up-to-date security features. So what is my remediation plan? We can enter a comment in here. You can see we can add public and private comments to any of these. So I've added in a comment that says, hey, we need to upgrade this piece of the platform or of the customer's equipment to get them moving in the right place. This is my remediation step. This is that remediation planning that we were talking about that leads them to projects, that leads them to strategic conversations about what's going to happen in the next 6 months, 12 months, 5 years, whatever. And then, of course, we give you room for internal private comments for the scenario like Marnie was talking about. You've got an engineer filling this out, but someone else delivering it. They might want to scroll through here and read all the private comments. This is where you can say, hey, the customer won't accept a recommendation, so they're still running this cheap old device that we can't stand supporting. What I found at my MSP was, as soon as I taught my technical team that if they reported something to us, they would get it fixed, that the account managers would go out and have a meeting with the customer and present something in red. All of a sudden, my help desk wanted to know what kind of conversations we were having, because if they knew what these questions were, my goodness, if there was a firewall they were tired of dealing with, or an old server they were tired of dealing with, if they heard that customer was having a QBR, they were raising their hand going, please mark this question red so that you can get rid of this device for me so I stop getting that trouble ticket. So if you train your team and let your team know what you're doing in here, they'll really give you some help. But the template includes, this particular one includes 6 sections. This is what Marnie was talking about, with the ability to say, hey, this is going to be section 1. This is going to be our low tech section, where this is just maybe cyber hygiene and the basics that we do. If we only fill out the first section, when we go to print the report from it, it's only going to print the first section. It's going to pretend like the other sections don't exist. If we fill out sections 1, 2, and 3, it'll just show sections 1, 2, and 3. Obviously, you can tweak these, convert them, make them anything you want. And then when we go to print the deliverables, it looks like this. Here is that form that I was talking about. And these are the items really that make up my remediation planning at the end. So I want a specific detail page to talk about at-risk items, needs attention items, and acceptable risk items. And then when I print it, I'm going to stick my logo on it, and I'm going to go generate a Word document from it that we're going to go have a conversation with our customer about. And for those of you guys that are lifecycle partners, you've seen this 1, 2, or 100 times, somewhere in between there. But what this looks like is a risk assessment that shows you the overall score for the client, how they scored in each individual section, and then a breakdown of how they've done on each individual question. Early on, you'll probably talk through each question and say, hey, you know what, you're good on asset inventory, we take that for you. It's under us, we got it covered. You needed to pay attention to your firewall. Power management's in a good place. You bought that battery backup we asked you to buy last year, your server's covered. Hey, here's one thing that we marked acceptable risk because you've got a bunch of other projects we want you to do this quarter. We're not going to replace this PC till next quarter. We'll let you slide on that one. But as you get further through this, as you work with the customer more and more, you're going to have more and more green boxes, and you're going to go through those sections pretty quickly and say, hey, you know, maybe we don't need to talk about that. Maybe we can just go stop patting ourselves on the back for the good things that we've done and talk about the things that are really actionable that we can help resolve. So we get into this this item detail where we just show our at-risk items or where we just show our needs attention items. And this gives us the ability to actually remediation plan. So what you saw me type in there for my recommendations and improvement instructions in the system carries right over to this report. So we can say, hey, you know what, we found servers to be at risk because they're beyond end of life and they don't have a warranty. So if they go down, we're eBaying for parts. I'm going to recommend that the customer do a server project to get this taken care of, or maybe we do a cloud migration or whatever, but your own custom comments go in here. These last 5-6 pages become your remediation plan. You can staple this together, lay it in front of your customer, and here's your workbook, Mr. Customer. These are all the things we need to fix in the next 3 to 6 months to get you to where you need to be. If they have a compliance requirement, this is going to be part of getting them CMMC, getting them NIST 800 171, getting them to any of these points. And your questions, while they can be customized to you, should be geared towards where that customer is really going, where they're headed. And then I always like to leave some acceptable risk items. I throw this one out here because it's kind of a freebie. There is a mental aspect to letting a customer have an easy win. Hey, you know, we talked about redundant internet. You said your Comcast is up more often than it's down, and you're willing to be down for an hour or two. So my insurance company makes me tell you about redundant internet, so your business doesn't hemorrhage cash when the internet goes down. But you know, if you're not going to do anything about it, just initial down here at the bottom of this page that I told you about it, and we'll move on. Some more advanced MSPs are customizing these reports and having sign-off verbiage from their insurance company or from their put on those pages. So that's really assessments in a nutshell in our platform. You know, the really high level, quick and dirty of it.
That was perfect. Yeah, did absolutely, and good timing as it is 3:58.
Oh, it is.
So, yeah. So I think that's a good stopping point for sure.
Yeah.
If you have additional questions, you can always find us at info@lifecycleinsights.io will get us. Boy, social, Twitter, YouTube, like we're out there. So feel free to let us know if you have questions. I will absolutely send out the recording. There are a bunch of links in the chat, and I'll also make sure we send out the recording that I meant that Alex referenced a few times. Hope you all found value in today. We appreciated having you.
Thanks for your time, everybody.